Welcome back, and in this lesson I'm going to be covering something that will make complete sense by the end of the course. I'm introducing it now because I want you to be thinking about it whenever we're talking about AWS products and services. And the topic is the shared responsibility model. Now the easiest way to explain this is visually, so let's jump in. Remember earlier in the course when I talked about the various different cloud service models? In each of these models, there were parts of the infrastructure stack that you were responsible for as the customer, and parts of the infrastructure stack that the vendor or provider were responsible for. With IaaS, for example, so the middle column, the company providing the IaaS product, so AWS in the case of EC2, they're responsible for the facilities, the AWS data centers, the infrastructure, so storage and networking, the servers, so EC2 hosts, and the hypervisor that allows physical hardware to be carved up into independent virtual machines. You as the customer manage the operating system, any containers, any runtimes, the data on the instance, the application, and any ways in which it interfaces with its customers. This is an example of a set of shared responsibilities. Part of the responsibilities lie with the vendor and part lie with you as the customer. The AWS shared responsibility model is like that, only applying to the wider cloud platform from a security perspective. It's AWS's way of making sure that it's clear and that you understand fully which elements you manage and which elements it manages. At a high level, AWS are responsible for the security of the cloud. You as a customer are responsible for the security in the cloud. Now let's explore this in a little bit more detail because it will help you throughout the course and definitely for the exam. Now I've covered the AWS infrastructure at a high level in a previous lesson. AWS provide these to you as a service that you consume. So AWS are responsible for managing the security of the AWS regions, the availability zones, and the edge locations. So the hardware and security of the global infrastructure. You have no control over any of that, and you don't need to worry about it. It's the of the cloud part, and so it's AWS's responsibility. And the same holds true for the compute, storage, databases, and networking, which AWS also provide to you. So AWS manage the security of those components. And finally, in addition, any software which assists in those services. So AWS manage all of this part of the stack. So the hardware, the regions, the global network, the compute, storage, database, and networking services, and then any software that is used to provide that service, AWS manage that end to end. If you consume a service from AWS, they handle the provisioning and the security of that thing. So take EC2 as an example. The region and the availability zone that the instance run in, that's AWS's responsibility. The compute, the storage, the underlying databases and networking for that service. From a security perspective, that's AWS's responsibility. The software, so the user interface, the hypervisor, that's handled by AWS. Now you accept responsibility for the operating system upwards, so what does that include? Well, it means things like the client-side data encryption, integrity, and authentication, server-side encryption, network traffic protection. If your application encrypts its data, for example, you manage that. If your server uses SSL certificates, you manage those. If you encrypt server-to-server communications, then you also handle that. You're also responsible for the operating system, networking, and any local firewall configuration. You're responsible for applications, identity, and access management of things that you will need to implement, manage, and control, and then any customer data, so any data that runs in this stack, you need to manage it, secure it, and ensure that it's backed up. Now this might seem like a pretty abstract concept. You might be wondering, does it actually benefit you in the exam? Now I'd agree with you to a point. When I was doing my AWS studies, I actually didn't spend much time on the shared responsibility model. But what I found is when I sat the exam, I did feel as though it could have benefited me to start learning about it early on when I was first starting my studies. So if you keep the shared responsibility in mind as we're going through the various different AWS products, you'll start building up an idea of which elements of that product AWS manage and which elements you're responsible for. So when it comes to deploying an EC2 instance into a VPC or using the relational database service to deploy a managed database inside a VPC, you need to know which elements of that you manage and which elements AWS manage. And so what I'll be doing is as we go through the course, I'll be referring back to this shared responsibility model fairly often so that you build up this overview of which elements you need to worry about and which are managed by AWS. So if possible, I would suggest that you either print out the shared responsibility model and put it on your desk as you're studying, or just make sure you've got a copy that you can refer back to, because it does become important to understand it at this high level. So I'm not going to use any more of your time on this topic. I just wanted to introduce it, and I promise you that I'm not going to be wasting your time by talking about things which don't matter. This will come in handy, and especially in the new SAAC02 exam, this is definitely something that will help you answer some questions. So that's all I wanted to cover for now. It's just a foundation, and I don't want to bore you with too much isolated theory. So again, try to keep this in mind as you go through the rest of the course, but for now, this is the level of detail that you need. So that's everything I wanted to cover. Go ahead, complete this lesson, and when you're ready, move on to the next.